In the ever-changing digital landscape, brands and agencies are constantly looking for better ways to reach their audiences. But Willy, the founder and CEO of Initiate, has spent over 15 years researching what makes audiences tick on social media and beyond. I asked him what brands should focus on in their digital strategy and whether the obsession with a large following is worth it.
We need to be clearer and not be driven by, the egotistical kind of driven goals, as opposed to what is it that we can do, why do we need to grow this way versus that way, and how are we going to ensure that we get a good quality of followers as opposed to just numbers.
We also addressed the question of whether AI will affect your job in the creative industry and beyond.
And in many cases, AI has got a huge productive aspect to it. Yes, it will decimate some jobs.
And what you can do about it.
One of the first things that we need to be doing, all of us, whether we work for ourselves within or work within agencies or work within companies, the question we must always be preoccupying ourselves with lately is, how do I become AI literate?
For more insightful conversations, subscribe to the Lead Creative Podcast, and please share this episode. It really helps. Welcome to the Lead Creative Podcast, where we talk to creative industry leaders, influencers, and brands. We discuss the strategies that influence brand thinking and shape industries. Thought leaders and heads of agencies let us in on some of their thinking and insights. I'm your host, Mongezi Mtati. Enjoy the show, and please share and subscribe. But Willy, thanks for making the time to talk to us on the Lead Creative. Yeah, what an honor. It's and I'm glad we're talking now because this is season 5. So we had to prepare for you, basically, right?
Man, that's special. I feel very honored right
now. So we had to make sure that everything was working before we could bring the legend in. So when you started your agency Initiate in 2008, social media was very much at its infancy at the time. We were just trying to figure out what this thing can do and how it can change our lives. And fast forward a couple of years later, it has changed our lives. But I suppose the question for me is, what are you seeing that brands are still doing today that they were doing then, which should have changed but hasn't?
Funny enough, Putmonges, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, true.
It's just been my experience. You are right. It's been that long time ago. We've been in the game now for 15 solid years.
Yeah.
And personally, my area of passion has been in the analytics space.
Sure.
Which was a discovery. I didn't know that I love analytics this much until I went into the online space. But back to your question, we finding that brands are still doing the same old thing. Let's go back to traditional media to make the point.
Sure.
To this day, a lot of brands are using TV, but they're still battling to really measure the impact of TV. And I'm using TV as the largest of the traditional media. To be able to effectively measure its impact on their brands. They have a general view.
Sure.
But really, the brands that can arguably say that they have a better understanding are those that are tracking return on investment insofar as sales go. And these tend to be insurance companies because they run infomercials with a number specific to that advert on that TV station,
right,
for that particular program. So they're able to track then what is the conversion rate from when you see the such information to the sales that then follow. but by and large, the bulk of the brands don't. It's no different insofar as the digital space is concerned. And in fact, we found, and this continues to be the case, that the it is even more confusing in the digital space because there's so many more metrics that you can measure, you know? Because again, when you go back to TV, there's only so many. Audience rating is one measure that tends to be used the most. But because your advert is being flighted together with other adverts, there's all sorts of estimations that are being made. Now, in the digital space, the amount of metrics that you can measure is just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And this makes it even more difficult for brands, which then leads them to measuring what I choose to call the shiny objects.
Sure.
You know, how many people have seen this, which then speaks to reach and impressions. To some extent, what have been the engagements, and even with engagements, there's also a few more sub metrics that you can talk to there.
Right.
Is it likes? Is it shares? Is it comments? Is it? So we're finding that brands are battling with that too. Now the industry has now tried to import the concept of ROI into the digital space, but there's still no common agreement as to what ROI means in a digital sense, because digital is not as good in terms of being a sales conversion as it is a brand discovery and a brand building a channel. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole lot of argument insofar as this is concerned too. I remember I had a debate with Mashudu some time ago, and I said, you can't treat this primarily as a sales channel, and he said, no, you can. Right. And that already tells you that, there is no universal science insofar as the issue of the digital space is concerned. So where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is that brands are still battling. Mm-hmm. I suppose we as the practitioners are also to blame because we're not helping the brands. We're supposed to be helping the brands to be able to pick the right metrics, given their objectives, and be able to help them measure properly. So
let's unpack a little bit around this picking the right metrics, because there are, of course, B2B scenarios, B2C scenarios, and even in either one, you can go deeper and get more specific. I like the fact that you mentioned that sometimes brands like to measure the shiny metrics, the vanity metrics, as some might say. In these instances when, as you say, you can't really measure it, or at least, direct it to a sale to say, this is the person who looked at my Facebook post or my post on X, and this is the sale as a result, because all of this becomes a basket, or forms part of this basket of brand discovery, awareness, and all of these things. What should we then be measuring at different levels?
Awesome. Now, I want to answer that question coming at it from two angles. Mm-hmm. The first angle is we need to know where our brand is insofar as the digital funnel itself is concerned. Because some brands are much more established. Take Nando's. Some brands are still at the starting blocks. Take which is this new
the insurance
chicken
company
brand that is kind of creating.
Oh yes, yes. I think
that's creating
I'm not
the
sure,
waves.
but I think it's Pedro, probably Pedro's, but I'm not sure if it is.
There
Pedro's.
There you go. So when you are Pedro and when you are Nando's, you can't measure the same stuff, because insofar as the let me generically call it the digital maturity continuum, you still at the starting blocks as Pedro, the Nando's who've been at it for such a long time and really established themselves, and they know what they're doing, and they've kind of bent their fingers a few times to know what works and what doesn't. even though as we've all come to know, the digital space is of the nature that you can't really say you know it all, but you know enough to be able to do what needs to be done. So the issue of plotting your brand along this digital maturity continuum is important, because that will then determine which metrics you must then look at. So let me stick with the two examples, because they are kind of most common insofar as the average marketer is concerned. So when you are Pedro, you are still within the brand discovery kind of stage. But when you are Nando's, you are more within the you are further down the line insofar as the continuum is concerned. So your focus tends to then be about community development.
Sure.
When you're Pedro, you've got such a limited community for you to be worrying about development, but more, how do I get this brand out there so that it has a higher reach, versus how do I make sure that I consolidate insofar as the community that I've grown over the time. So those are the two kind of ends of the spectrum, and each brand needs to know this. The trouble is that many of the brands want to rush along quickly to, I want to, I have so many followers and therefore I'm strong. And this interestingly kind of reminds me of the debate that Jack Dorsey, the then CEO of Twitter, was having with some of the so-called experts within this space, where he was saying, Twitter to many people may be smaller than the other social networks.
Yeah.
But the issue of numbers is not the only measure. And in fact, we want to downgrade it as a measure.
Right.
Because for us as Twitter, engagement is key. So we want to be looking more at engagement than we do at numbers. And hopefully we will talk about Twitter and the numbers, during the course of this chat.
Yeah.
But I want to then go back to the question that you were asking. You need to know where your brand is along this digital maturity continuum, and then link the proper metrics that go to this. Now, we took a stab, Monks, in 2019 at coming up with what we call the science of metric selection. We actually call our model the 1+4 metric matrix.
Right.
Because what we found is, given that there are so many metrics that you can select, our recommendation to brands that we work with and everybody who cares to listen out in the market is, yes, you need a minimum of one input metric and a maximum of one output metric. What do I mean? There are metrics that we can't control. You can't control engagement.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
We wish for engagement, but as to whether you will get 200 likes versus 50 likes versus, it's not in your control. But one thing that you can control has got to do with the quality of the content that you put out there, has got to do with the content mix that you put together, has got to do with how you leverage user generated content for purposes of being able to amplify your own messages. Those are kind of the input metrics that you can control, and hence we're saying have a minimum of 1, maximum of 4, not more. And then have one output metric. As I said, engagement, which you can even break further down, is one such output metric that you can have. And the more specific you are, the better. And we give different examples in the paper that we put out there in 2019, as I said. Happy to actually share that with you so that you can include it maybe in the podcast notes.
Sure.
So hopefully that is what brands can use more and be clear what they're looking for. I want to just make a quick example and allow you to come in case you want to ask further questions. We had a brand that we were doing work for back in 2015. And when we took over this brand, they were sitting at around 1,000 Twitter followers at that stage, and one of their goals for us. This was a 6-month stint, by the way, and they said by the end of 6 months we want to get to 20,000 followers. It was like, okay, what informs that number?
Yeah.
And they were kind of ducking and diving, and we came to discover down the line it's because they were in competition with the bigger brand within the group, and that brand was already sitting at 50,000 Twitter followers. So they wanted to get to that number by hook or crook. And we said to them, yes, you can get there, but it means you have to buy the followers. And the problem with that is that you don't know the quality of the followers, because you can never get there based on organic stuff.
Sure.
Even in cases where you promote the content, you're not guaranteed to get to 20,000 from 1,000 followers in 6 months. And they had been in the market, they had been on Twitter at that stage for a good 3 years. So the point I'm then making goes back to this issue of metrics. Which metrics do we choose? Why do we choose those metrics? Where are we in terms of the brand along the continuum? We need to be clearer and not be driven by the egotistical kind of driven goals, as opposed to what is it that we can do? Why do we need to grow this way versus that way? And how are we going to ensure that we get a good quality of followers as opposed to just numbers? Back to you.
That's a really, I think that's a really great observation, and that's a great point, because there's this obsession among brands as well as individuals of numbers, right? And the number of followers, the number of engaged, I suppose, people or accounts can then be turned into some form of ROI, or at least that's the belief, right? So if you are an individual, the number of followers that you have across platforms makes you a micro influencer, a nano influencer, whatever the case is, based on just the numbers, and not necessarily the quality of the following, as you put it. So how then do we reconcile this obsession with the number of followers, the number of people we supposedly reach, when that number is actually something that we just make up?
Yeah. It's interesting you're asking that question. There is a tool which is called fake followers.
Sure.
And I know there's a few more tools out there. When you use this tool, what it will show to you is that some people actually buy followers. You will know this based on just the extent of the fake followers that they have within their community. Okay, fake followers would mainly be bots. Okay, now, so the higher the percentage of fake followers, that they have probably bought their followers. There is also a kind of common trend where the bigger you grow, Bonang Mateba being one example,
Sure.
The bigger you grow, the bigger the extent of the fake followers, because these bots tend to follow those who are well known across these spaces. And let's stick with Twitter because it's an easier kind of example. So the increasingly brands that are clever, they're saying, look, it's great that we have such a number of followers for ourselves within our community, but how engaged are these followers?
Right.
So increasingly, the tools are now starting to say it's not good enough to have followers, but we must also be asking the question, what is the extent of the engagement that these followers give us?
Yes.
So you now start to kind of tone down on the number of followers, keep it in balance. We do need some form of followers because we don't want to be talking to ourselves.
Absolutely.
I make an example of a church minister where you don't want to be talking to yourself in an empty church, but at the same time, you don't want to have a church full of people who are not interested in your sermon. So it's finding a nice balance between those two.
Sure.
So a lot of the tools are now looking at the quality of the engagement which tells us something about the level of interest that our followers have in us as brands, and also to that extent, how much of these engagements are resulting in them becoming our own silent salesmen.
Sure.
Because if they like what we say, they will then go share
Yeah, they'll
our
amplify the
content.
message,
They will
yeah.
also even go talk about our content unsolicited. Nando's is an example back there, because if there's any interesting trend that's taking root out in the market, and especially within the entertainment space, you will hear some of the tweets asking, "We wonder what Nando's is going to say about this." That's how you know that Nando's has got a following that is really engaged, that have been observing what they're doing, and they are starting to now find relevance for them insofar as the various trending topics go. So that question that you asked is really a key one indeed.
If you're enjoying The Lead Creative, please share this episode with your network and hit follow or subscribe. Enjoy the show.
So I want to ask, so it's sort of a two-pronged question here, right? Again, on this numbers and followers and number of followers thing. And this is this is something that the one side is something that I get a lot being a podcaster, sort of playing in this space. And this is a question around how many followers do you have? How many subscribers do you have? How many this, how many that, right? Because of course brands want that coverage before they can collaborate and partner. So that's the one side of the question. And this side of the question really is this idea of, I may have 5 followers, 100 followers, but I talk to you on the podcast, and I talk to someone who has 100,000 followers, someone who has 200,000 followers, 1,000,000 followers, someone who has followers on LinkedIn more than on X, where they probably focus less. So then what is the value of me having 10 followers when I actually talk to someone who has 100,000 followers and helps to amplify my message, and that is the basis of my platform? So that's the one side of the question. Like, why are numbers so important? Because you also work with brands. So why are numbers so important to brands when increasingly the numbers matter less because of who can amplify the message of the person who has 10 followers? Is it just, or is it about the quality of the followers? Because I hear you coming back to quality quite a lot with this fake followers and everything else. So that's one side of the question. And the other side is there's this obsession with numbers, again, among brands who are in the B2B space, when in actual fact, we know that if you're in B2B, you probably play a lot on LinkedIn. And if you play a lot on LinkedIn, statistics will tell you that most people who are on LinkedIn are job seekers. Yes, there are many professionals in the professional space, but most people there are job seekers. So if you increase your followers on LinkedIn as a brand, it's likely that you're increasing your followers with job seekers rather than potential clients. So that's the second part of the question. How do we then reconcile this idea of numbers when a person with a very little following can have their message amplified by people with a bigger following? And how do you then talk about this idea of numbers and number of followers on a LinkedIn, or if we are a B2B brand?
Okay. The response to the first question, Monks, is that it is up to you as the podcaster to be a bit of a data junkie. Because when you are that, you are able to show more than just the issue of followers. To the point that you made, I may have 10 followers, but look at the level of amplification of my podcast because of the quality of the guests that I have. Because if you have, you recently had Seyama, you had the gentleman from PwC, you've had Seth Godin. Those are big names within the online space. So the question is, how do you then show, without just talking about your guests themselves,
Sure,
but just through them, what is the level of engagement that is being seen? The second thing to being a data junkie is then starting to show how many of your followers tend to keep coming back, because that's a sign of stickability. You can have as many followers as you like. You will know that in addition to your podcast, which I try and listen to religiously because you are my brother, not for any for, let me rephrase, because that may sound
No,
that may be
no,
taken out
it's
of
good enough
context.
for me, by the way. But yeah, yeah,
Well, but for the listening
yeah.
audience, it may be taken out of context. I listen to your podcast because it's got good quality content coming from, the selection of guests that you have. Hence, I've mentioned Serge and PwC guy, and also Seth. I mean, Seth is a big deal within the marketing thing. You will know offline. I asked you, how did you get hold of Seth? Because he's not known to be so publicly available. So it was a huge scoop for you. I must admit. But anyway, the point is, of those few followers that you may have, how many of them keep coming back? I'm evidently one of them. And then the question that then goes with this is, okay, if you have many of these people coming back, there is an element of stickability. There's a good chance that the brands that you work with will get oh so much value, because we know that messages that tend to stick are the ones that are being heard more than once. So from a data junkie point of view, if you're able to demonstrate that to brands, hopefully it's not only brands that are just interested in numbers for numbers' sake, but the quality of the numbers that you have, which you can demonstrate as such. Now, the second point to the question you were asking about the whole issue of LinkedIn and the job
Yeah,
seeker
yeah.
versus clients. Cool. Now, the question becomes, how much of the potential call to action are you able to elicit when you're talking to your community? Because when you have a brand partnership going, you will intermittently tell us about these brands that you're in partnership with, and you are able to then measure the extent of the call to action that you are asking us to take, because that also demonstrates whether these brands are getting the value for their money. And if you're able to demonstrate that, hopefully the brands will see beyond just the size of your community, because there are a whole lot of people who are getting these large numbers,
Right.
but those numbers are found to be poor quality numbers. So what is the point in the end? Yeah.
Right. So we should be focused really on the quality of the numbers rather than the numbers themselves,
Absolutely.
and how
Absolutely.
and measure how many people sort of return as a sign that our content resonates with more and more of the right
Yeah.
people. That
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, you've been following trending content for years now and analyzing this trending content. You spoke about analytics earlier.
Yeah.
Now, social media has increasingly become a pay to play space where this idea of this engagement that you talk about has come down quite a lot, so much so that even community management has reduced in many spaces around this space. So then, with this pay to play model that is increasing on social media day by day, are there still opportunities to create groundbreaking organic content for brands without paying for it?
I think there are. Yes, they're becoming more difficult with time, but certainly they are. And I say this because when it comes to communications, there will always be an opportunity for new trends to take root, because the technologies themselves are developing, and they then present certain opportunities for us if we are able to follow such developments and keep asking ourselves, how can we do things better, differently, and so on and so on. So there's definitely those opportunities, because if there weren't, we wouldn't be seeing new entrants into the market making a name for themselves. So those opportunities will always be there. The key thing with brands and all of us, even the practitioners, like in my case, is to keep asking, how do we keep up with these developments, and how do we leverage these developments as they occur, and in some cases try and be ahead of the trends themselves. The biggest trend at the moment is AI.
Sure.
So the question that we should be asking is, okay, what does AI mean for us? And hopefully we will talk about that during the duration of this chat. Because if we forever rely on the things that we used to do last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and we are so fixed insofar as that formula, we run the risk that these new developments, a good number of which are very disruptive, will really caught us off guard, because we find that we stick into the old ways of doing things when there are opportunities to be doing new things, or doing the same things in a new or different way.
Makes sense.
So there's definitely opportunities.
Okay. There's a lot of talk about the fall or the demise of X. Some brands are leaving.
Yeah.
Other brands are staying. Some experts are saying
Yeah.
it's getting better. Some people are saying it's getting worse. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts? One, on where it's going, and secondly, how brands can safeguard themselves in what they deem to be the negativity across various platforms, not just X.
Now, it's interesting, and by the way, I refuse to call it X. I think Elon has kind of lost his marbles there. Let's see how long it's gonna last, because I tend to kind of catch on a bit slower when it comes to issues of brands and names, to be honest. But anyway, if you allow me, I'll call it Twitter.
Sure.
Let's use Twitter as an example. We thought, even I thought, that with Elon being the kind of maverick that he is, I thought that when he took over Twitter, we will see a seismic kind of shift. People are going to go away. Threats came into the market, and Mark Zuckerberg was telling us that the numbers are kind of increasing at an exponential rate. Even Jack Dorsey was looking at introducing an alternative to Twitter. We know that before Elon took over Twitter, there was Clubhouse, which was threatening to do things differently. And when you ask about Clubhouse now it's nowhere. Threads was a bit of a flash in the pan from my own experience. And interestingly, when you look at the stats for Twitter has had their biggest quarter ever in September of 2023. For the longest period, Twitter was hovering globally at 300 million monthly active users. But in September 2023, it hit a number of over 500 monthly active users. So that tells you that something is happening there. Now, and there are many lessons that we can take from this. One such lesson is people have become familiar with Twitter. It's working for them, and they don't have a fundamental reason outside of just the cancel culture. They don't have a fundamental reason to move away.
Right.
And one classic example for those of us who've been following AI developments, we know that in November of last year, there was a whole saga happening at OpenAI, where on the 17th of November, Sam Altman, the CEO and co-founder of OpenAI, was given the boot by the board. 5 days later, he was rehired because there was a threat from the employees that they were going to stage a major resignation and go join him at Microsoft.
Right.
All of this was playing out on Twitter ahead of all the other platforms. We were following it live on Twitter and nowhere else. Mm-hmm. The other platforms were kind of, catching up with what was happening after it had happened.
Yeah.
So the point about this particular thing is that Twitter continues to be strong. Yes, we can't say in this space we can never say never because stuff has happened. Now we must remember there have been so many obituaries written about Facebook, and it's still here.
Yes, true, true.
Even the so-called influencers who claim that they have moved away from Facebook are still on Facebook. So the point that I'm making there is that Twitter is still around, it's still doing its own thing. And guess what? My prediction is because there's still the likes of you and me who are using Twitter, brands will come back. Because it's unlike in the past where as consumers we needed to follow the brands to be able to know what they're doing. Right now, brands follow us.
Yeah.
So with the fact that Twitter is growing in terms of monthly active users, brands will have no choice but to come back.
Yeah.
Because where else can they go?
Yeah, I think that
You know?
that reminds me of, I think, 2018, 2019. I think it was when there was said to be a mass exodus of brands outside of Facebook. We're not hearing about that
There you go.
as much
There
today.
you go.
Yeah, you're making a lot of sense there. You keep mentioning AI, and I think let's jump onto that, because that is one of the areas that's affecting creativity, that's affecting strategies at the moment. So in your view, what is the role of AI in a digital strategy before we get to the creative side?
Now here's the thing. Let me take you back just one step. I follow AI trends deliberately, actively, because I worry that at my age I may become an old dog who doesn't learn new tricks. So I'm making sure that I deliberately follow these trends so that I can adapt, and I can be agile as and when there is a need, and there's already that need.
Sure.
So when you look at the latest report that was published by the IMF, and I noticed that the same report was actually the one that was coming from World Economics Forum's jobs report. It indicates that there are certain jobs that are going to be most affected by AI. And from a sector perspective,
Yeah.
marketing and the whole creative sector, we are quite high up.
Sure.
So why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning it because it's important to kind of understand how that forms the context for the role of AI insofar as digital strategy is concerned. That if AI in this case is having such an impact insofar as jobs within marketing and creative sectors are concerned, it means that the digital strategy is being affected directly as well.
Right.
Before the advent of generative AI, which really hit the market in November of 2022, we thought that robotics were going to have the major impact on jobs, which at that stage was alluding to blue collar jobs. Come generative AI, it has really just turned that on its head. Now the jobs that are being affected the most are actually the white collar jobs.
Right.
Any white collar jobs that have got the prospect of being automated are being affected directly. And it's not any different for us within the marketing, communication, and advertising industry. And so is the case insofar as digital strategy is concerned. So the question all of us must be asking, regardless of the sector, is the extent to which our jobs are going to be affected or have already been affected by automation. Leave AI aside, because we get ourselves so confused about AI, and we're trying to give it all sorts of definitions and that. Just ask the question, what is the extent that my job is going to be automated? As soon as you have some kind of an answer to that, then you know how much of an impact AI is going to have on these different roles, strategy included. And we could argue that maybe strategy itself, because it's such an involved process at a mental level,
Yes.
it may not be affected to the same extent as writing, but it's going to be affected regardless. Both positively and negatively, by the way, because in a lot of cases when we're talking about the impact on AI on the various sectors and roles, we tend to think about it in a negative way. There's also the positive way to this, and the positive way is for those who really are upskilling themselves to make sure that they can incorporate AI in terms of what they do. How is AI going to actually help them do things faster, more efficiently, and using less effort? So it happens both ways, as it were.
If you're enjoying The Lead Creative, please share this episode with your network and hit follow or subscribe. Enjoy the show.
Now, in terms of how we use it effectively in these
Yeah,
industries, as because yes, it affects jobs, but also it empowers people who use it effectively. And you've been mentioning
there you go.
this idea of upskilling yourself and understanding it. In what instances or what use cases have you seen AI
Yeah.
being used successfully? And I'm asking this because we've been talking about this quite a that part we've been talking about quite a lot, but there's a side to this that hasn't been spoken about a lot, where things are fully automated or brands are fully dependent on AI to almost replace either agency functions or functions that were predominantly delivered by somebody within the agency. I've asked this to brands as well, and brand leads or marketers in those spaces, CMOs, say things like, I don't hire an agency for what I can get from AI. I hire an agency for what I can get from a human being, which is something
Yeah.
completely different. And that space will always exist. It might just mean you need less people to deliver on the work, but it might just exist. So, how then do we use it effectively as a companion in the creative, or as a collaborator in this creative process and the delivery of the strategy and the insight that you speak of?
I like your phrase on using AI as a companion, because we are finding that when we start viewing AI holistically, as opposed to likening it to a boogeyman, we're most likely going to find the positives with it that can only help to make us more productive. And in many cases, AI has got a huge productive aspect to it. Yes, it will decimate some jobs. Every technology will decimate some jobs. You can look at all these technologies all the way from when we started with industrializations, from the agricultural era coming this way. Some jobs had been decimated, but at the same time, new jobs come up for those who are willing to upskill, to diversify, and so on and so on. It's going to be the case this time around. So from the point of view of your question, one of the first things that we need to be doing, all of us, whether we work for ourselves within or work within agencies or work within companies, the question we must always be preoccupying ourselves with lately is, how do I become AI literate? Let's start there. Because when we understand the positive impact of AI, we're able to then ask a question: how do I skill myself so that I become valuable as an AI practitioner now? Because the greatest thing about AI, as has been found, is that it is helping to democratize the issue of knowledge even more. Internet was meant to do that, but we came to find not quite. But AI is going to do it even more, because you and me and everybody else now, as you speak, have got access to ChatGPT, We can use the free version of ChatGPT. We can do the same with Google Bard and a few other such large language model platforms. So let's start by getting literate. Even if at a very artificial level, where we asking ChatGPT to help us with stupid tasks, but at least we getting to understand how it works, how it responds, and with time we can start now going up the level insofar as using it as a partner insofar as the jobs that we do. Again, I say across the level, no one must assume that AI is not going to impact them, even though we're finding that with some jobs, more blue collar jobs at this stage, because robotics are still not there yet.
Sure.
So they are least affected, but I'm using the word least to indicate the point that AI is going to affect us all at various levels with various intensities. So all of us have got the responsibility to be able to teach ourselves how AI works and how we can leverage it to our advantage, because if we don't do so, we are in trouble. So let's start first with literacy. And from literacy, then we can start learning the technical ins and outs of using AI to improve our productivity levels. Now, let me stick with the copyright has to make the point.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying AI is taking copywriting jobs away from us, we should be asking, how do I use AI to be able to do what I was using to do quicker with less effort?
Yes.
Because we know that AI can help us do that, and it then opens a space for us to be able to do more or some other things, because we know that we don't have to be penning stuff down from the first letter.
Right.
If we are cleverer at being able to use prompts, and there are now lots and lots of sites and podcasts and YouTube videos that are helping us learn how to use prompts to be able to get the best answers possible on the likes of ChatGPT. Let's go there, because as part of upskilling ourselves literacy-wise, we'll be able to know how to ask the right questions to get the right responses, and not be worried about, this thing's going to take my job. This thing hallucinates.
Yeah.
Because we are only serving to create unnecessary barriers that can only make it more difficult for us to be able to learn how AI works.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah, I get it. And I think the biggest takeaway for me there is literacy. If we can be more AI literate, then we can use AI as a collaborative tool, and also which then opens up other opportunities for us to work within the space, within a world of AI, or within a world where AI works quite a lot. Now, but we have a question or a tradition on the show, and I'm sure if you've listened to the show, you might have caught on to this. But if you could ask any living person about their unique take on marketing creativity, or their creative approach to work or life, who would that person be, and what is the one question that you would ask them?
Phew. You caught me off guard there. Give me just one second to come up with one. There are so many.
Sure.
With me listening to all sorts of various podcasts lately, many names come to mind. Alex Homozy is the one guy who readily comes to mind now. I know that he's not South African.
Sure, it doesn't.
And by
He
the way, I have
doesn't.
to,
Well, they don't have to be South African.
yeah.
They could be from anywhere in the world. So, what would you ask Alex Homozy?
Why does he have such a dim view of Africa when it comes to issues of poverty? The bone for me to pick is that I tend to find that non-Africans treat Africa as one country.
Sure.
It's about poverty in Africa, as opposed, as though we are one nation. When there are so many countries that are doing well, if at the least pockets within Africa that are really doing well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having the richest black person in the world coming from Africa, being Dangote. That must be telling you something about the fact that Africa is not necessarily just a poverty-stricken nation across the board. I love Alex, by the way. That's why he comes so readily to mind. I think his content is great. I love the way he comes across, in on the various podcast and YouTube video platforms. But man, when it comes to Africa, he just makes these blanket statements, and I think, Alex, I wish you could just reach out to us Africans and ask us to upskill you a little.
Yeah.
When it comes to Africa, that there's 54 countries on this continent, and some of them are really doing well. But yes, that would be my Alex would be my pick, and my question to him would be, why is it that you have such a dim view of Africa when it comes to issues of poverty? That's me.
Now, there's a new question that I'd like to ask you, which we've never asked before. So this is the first time we're asking this one. So if there was one question that you could ask our next guest about the industry or their creative process, what would you ask them?
What I would ask them, we'll go back to AI, as I'm sure you may guess. And the question for me is, are they following the trends that have to do with the particular skills that will be most affected and least affected insofar as AI is concerned, and specifically within our industry? That would be my question to them.
Awesome. But I really thank you so much for making the time. That there was a lot in that we could unpack further. I would have loved to even talk more about the digital and social media landscape. You've given us a lot to think about in terms of AI as well, and you've got these two questions that we can ask the world. Thank you so much. It was an honor talking to you.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this opportunity for a long while. So I'm glad that I can tick that on my bucket list.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Lead Creative. Did you get one insight that's worth sharing from this episode? Please share it with your network or your friends. Pop me some of your ideas and innovative finds on Twitter on @Mongezi. This podcast is available on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also find me on mongezi.com.